Hello, I'm Toycat, and India, just like the United States or Australia, is divided into separate states, and one of these states, just a single one, Uttar Pradesh, has a higher population than any other subdivision in the world, and a higher population than all but 7 countries on the planet, and then there's 27 other states. That really helps you understand the scale of India, but it's also really interesting because a lot of things that are famous for being in India, such as tech workers, or Bollywood, or the Himalayan mountains, are found in vastly different parts of it. And also, just alongside all of that, did you know 4 states in India still practice prohibition of alcohol? You cannot have alcohol anywhere inside those places. What a wacky situation. Although, I've heard in these 2 places, you can buy alcohol from a police officer, so, you know, well, long story short, what the heck is going on with India? How about we attempt to explain that, because ultimately, trying to understand a country as a whole will never work as well as if you try to break it down and understand it by the pieces. And so let's break down each of these states of India and explain to you exactly what's going on with them as briefly as we can, because there's 28 of them. It's going to be a fun ride to get through. And I also have to mention, although there's 28 states now and 8 union territories, so Jammu and Kashmir, which is a disputed region, belongs to India as a whole. It's a union territory, you know, it's administered by the central government, whereas Himachal Pradesh is a state and it's administered by the people locally. Most policies in a given state are done by the state government, with obviously the nationwide government doing things like defense and currency, etc. But it's interesting to note that India is a very recent country, but even if we take 1951 India, post-independence India, this is what the states looked like then, and this is what the states look like now. It's really hard to spot the differences from them side by side, but it's worth mentioning that if we go back to 1951, not only are certain states merged together or not split up or exclaved or enclaved like you can see over here, but also you'll see like, oh yeah, there's this part of India that still belonged to Portugal or the French, or like, oh yeah, that's just a weird time, because although the British left India when it gained independence, other countries maybe didn't do so until much later, and there's some super fun stuff with that. But yeah, to start with this, we'll talk with Himachal Pradesh, which is, by the way, you're going to notice the word Pradesh is going to come up a lot today, like Uttar Pradesh is the one with the most population, and so what is the deal with, the Pradesh? It is just roughly translated like province, so there's quite a few of these. When you see them, just listen to the first one. So this is Himachal, and you can probably guess from that, wow, are there mountains here? Yes, there are. It's the northernmost state in India. Generally speaking, you split India into 4 separate, kind of regions, of the country. There's north, there's south, there's east and west, which draw from whichever side they're on, and then there's northeast, which we'll get into. It's a fun time. But yeah, Himachal Pradesh is most famous for the Himalayas. What a great set of mountains those are. And then we've got Uttarakhand, which is also famous for mountainous stuff. It's like the snowiest part of the, but both these places are the snowy parts of the country, but Uttarakhand is also known for lots of other natural beauties. Like, look at this national park that exists in India. It's known as the Valley of Flowers. Super beautiful. There is stuff like this all over the state, and it's not very high in population, but it is very high in tourism, and honestly, you can kind of see why when you look around the place. If you want to look around basically anywhere, let's look around Jim Corbett National Park. I guarantee you, we find something beautiful just by hopping into it. That is what this place is all about. Okay, yeah, this is beautiful too. It's a man who is it's one of those cars that you can kind of walk along in, it looks like from here. But if the photosphere worked correctly, I'm sure that'd be beautiful. But yeah, this is the 2 northernmost states of India. But we're going to start getting into the fun controversy already, because India's kind of filled with those, right? I mean, Punjab is a region you might have heard about. It is one of the higher in terms of population, and it's really controversial because the former capital of Punjab, when it used to be under the British, was Lahore. And do you see the issue with the former capital of Punjab being Lahore? You might see that indeed, because part of Pakistan is perhaps most known for having the Punjab region. There is a huge one in India as well, and because the 2 states which used to be all one acceptable place now border each other, and they're in 2 pretty hostile nations, maybe they both developed nukes just so they could threaten each other. So maybe, that's actually it's one of those things that's not confirmed, but they both keep hinting it's true. So both Pakistan and India have a little bit of an issue with each other these days, and so Punjab is a region that is kind of at the heart of that. Like, the people are maybe fine with being on both sides, but maybe they can't go there because the border looks like this. It's heavily militarized. It's one of the most militarized borders in the world between friendly nations, and in case you're worried about isn't it racist to build walls along borders, don't worry, it wasn't an orange man that did it. Although, technically speaking, the guy who leads India right now is the, like his party is the Orange Party, so he is the Orange Man. But don't worry, it's fine because they have nukes to point at each other, so we can totally do that. By the way, unrelated map, but here's like, although India has a huge population now, you might think it's because they're like they have one of the highest birth rates in the world, but it's always been one of the centers of world population. Like, the rest of the world just kind of slowly industrialized to catch up. This map wasn't meant to be in this video, I just accidentally clicked it. Anyway, with that said, this is the Punjab region, and although it's famous for that, it's also famous for being very Sikh, so a lot of Sikh ideals, which I think, like, you know, if you're gonna rank religions, like, as a tier list, I feel like you'd put Sikhism pretty high up, but we're not gonna dive into that one too much. India is mostly a Hindu country. Sikhism is just popular in Punjab. So in Haryana, which is just to the south over here, there's an interesting thing where in their state, they have a little bit of their, you know, like their territory, which is given away to form this Delhi situation. By the way, can I just mention, it's one of my favorite, you know, because there's 28 states, but there's also union territories, and those union territories mostly are things that countries would call territories. So they're administered from the central government, like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is where North Sentinel Island is, and where uncontacted tribes can be. It's a very, very crazy situation, but as well as like places like that, and as well as territories that are on the frontier of India, like Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, you also find some union territories that are cities. So the capital of India is known as Delhi. Maybe you know it. The capital of India is New Delhi, but it's in the Union Territory of Delhi. So New Delhi's in Delhi, and then also in Delhi is Delhi, because Delhi is obviously the main city, and then New Delhi is the new version of it. So Delhi and New Delhi exist in Delhi, but there is also, it has to be mentioned, a small area of New Delhi from when it was a smaller place called Old Delhi. So Old Delhi is found inside of New Delhi and found inside of Delhi, which means that it's Old Delhi, New Delhi, Delhi, India, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I mean, you can probably go a step further and be like, well, it's the Delhi Junction in Old Delhi, in New Delhi, in India. But at some point, we say the word Delhi and it sounds like we're trying to order some cold meats or something. So let's instead talk about the next province over here, because we've gone through the four most northernmost. Let's talk about Rajasthan, because I think this is a great example of, like, India being diverse. I mean, everyone knows that India does have access to its mountains, and everyone knows that India has these super intense cities with railways that people are hanging onto the side of. But you might not know that India has a whole desert region, and that is Rajasthan. And so this area is interesting for its natural geography. I mean, just look at this for a second. What the heck is going on here? It looks like an entirely different place. Wow, our big country is geographically diverse? Wouldn't expect to learn that on a geography channel. So yeah, Rajasthan's interesting because the capital, Jaipur, was a very royal place during the British years, and so even when the British left, they kind of just figured, yeah, I guess we'll leave the king intact. Obviously, India is a full democracy. Every state has to be a democracy. But in spite of that, you can find some really interesting things about this guy. So the king of Jaipur is incredibly rich, and because he has this social status of being a former king, he has a huge sway in India, and I don't know, apparently there's like a huge following. People love the kings of India. He is the king though, but he's not considered a king in any way. He just used to be the king and their line keeps going, which is kind of fun proof to me. Like, people say like, oh yeah, in the UK, the queen, or the king now, he has to stay the king. He has to have some formal powers because people come to visit him. People care about kings even when they have no power, as India will prove to you. I mean, India's obviously a weird example, but still worth mentioning. And then we've got Uttar Pradesh over here to the right. So these are both pretty big states, right? And Uttar Pradesh is a really interesting place because it's got 200-something million people in a very small area. So it's super densely populated. But it leads to a few bad things, we might say. Like, they have a big problem with disease. They have a lot of fairly preventable issues that could be solved. It's one of the places, you know, again, I feel like any place that grows so big will run into issues like that, though. If you think about, like, certain parts of impoverished rural India, it might be in this place, which, you know, it's like a negative stereotype. But obviously in a country of 1 billion, you're going to have some parts that aren't as good as others. I mean, like, for example, Bihar right here is a really bizarre place because you might notice it's on the list of places where you cannot get alcohol, and that is, to me, bizarre. In India today, Gujarat is the biggest state, but also in Bihar, which is the more recent place to implement it, you just cannot buy alcohol. They had a whole issue of, like, actually implementing it. I got into a really interesting, I went into a really interesting deep dive about, like, okay, can you, like, they introduced it, then it turned out to be, like, unconstitutional, so they reintroduced it, and then it turned out to be a big thing. They have the death penalty for producing alcohol. It's a really, really, really bizarre situation. I don't know why they hate alcohol so much, but they really do. And then I learned, then if you dive into it further, you start finding things like, oh, and did you know that in Canada they had a referendum on Prohibition, and it turns out they voted yes, but they voted yes and they still didn't implement it. I'm just absolutely fascinated by Prohibition in the world. I didn't realize there were so many places still practicing it, and Bihar is one of those places. You wanna go here? Better get drunk before crossing the border, is my advice. Honestly, if you think about it, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that you can buy alcohol in 24 of the 28 states, you might say. Because, yeah, it's worth mentioning that the other alcohol-free state is Gujarat over here. It's most famous for Ahmedabad being the capital, the biggest city at the very least. I don't know if it's the capital, I'm sorry. But, yeah, Gujarat is a very interesting province over here because it is the other state which does not have any alcohol allowed in the whole thing. And this is a much more interesting case because if you look back at so here's the current states of India. It's so much easier to see on a colourful map than on that. If you look at the current states of India and you compare to the former states, you'll notice that Bombay used to take up this entire place. There's obviously there's like kind of a weird, there's other stuff happening over here, but basically Bombay used to have the rule against alcohol. Bombay became Mumbai, by the way, the city, and so they just kind of kept the alcohol rules, and it's just always been the case there, whereas again, Bihar is much more like, we don't like alcohol, we will get rid of it, and that leads to some very interesting things. Speaking of very interesting things, I think it has to be worth mentioning, Maharashtra is really, really... So, if India as a whole is mostly Hindu, and then there's some Sikhs over there, and there's some Buddhist parts, etc., Maharashtra is famous for being one of the most populated places where Jain vegetarianism is practiced. This is a type of vegetarianism where, like, maybe you call it, like, extremist vegetarianism. Like, they're like, yeah, some of them will wear face masks so they don't accidentally inhale bugs. Or, like, you want to make sure you're not ever stepping on any bugs. There are so many extra rules added to vegetarianism, and that is... it's one of the most extreme forms of it, you could say, but it's one of the oldest religions in the world, and so I guess that's cool. Speaking of things I guess are cool, we skipped over Madhya, Pradesh over here, which it's important to note that this used to be the largest state in India. We could probably go back to the old map and show you. Look, wow, look how huge it was. Honestly, it's funny. Look, so many of these borders just don't exist in the form they used to anymore. Like, it's been so reorganized, right? It's fascinating. But basically, Madhya Pradesh used to be the largest by area, but then Chhattisgarh broke off. Chhattisgarh mostly broke off because they're very tribal by comparison. It's really, again, so this is one of those things where, like, yeah, if you picture India as being any one thing, picture it as being big cities, and you'll forget that the majority of the population in the whole country still live in rural areas, in farm-based places. Try to imagine that India is poor. That India is like, like a bunch of people who are all like doing some stuff, and you're like, yeah, you're gonna forget there are native tribes people who have lived there and predate that in some ways. Even India has native peoples, and so I mean, like, really every country has native peoples. I would argue you're a native. If I move to India and I have children, I think my children would be native Indian, but that's a whole separate point for now. So yeah, this is Chhattisgarh right over here. It's a heavily forested state, and it's very, very much rural and very, very much tribal, and it's split from Madhya Pradesh mostly for these reasons, as best I can tell. So next up, we've got Odisha, and I have to... Well, actually, I guess we should go of Jharkhand and West Bengal. Honestly, which order do you go through the states in? Do you go from, like, left to right, or... We're just going through in a fun order. Does that sound good? Does it sound better if we just go through it in the vague flow? Because we've got, like, half the country down, but what about Odisha? Well, you see, Odisha is a state that is famous for its still using these lovely police pigeons. The police will message each other via pigeons. Isn't that cute? The Odisha police keeps up to date with Pigeon Post. Is that enough to know a state by? I mean, if you look into it more, you learn it's only sometimes used, and it just makes you sad and depressed, so you don't need to know anything else about Odisha. They use pigeons to get messages around. What more do you want to know? Next up, we have West Bengal. This is probably one of the more famous states. I mean, first of all, look at the size of... Look at the shape of this thing. Like, it's really, really thin in some parts. Like, this is one of the weirdest... if you see this anywhere house, you'd be like something gerrymandering. But obviously, you look at it in India and you're like, yeah, this is just where the Bengalese people mostly are. And so it's pretty interesting to look at because you can see like, okay, yeah, with Bangladesh, they've solved their border and everything's fine. But the thing that's most famous for is Kolkata. Kolkata is one of those states, cities that changed their name. It used to be Kolkata, and now it's Kolkata. And if you can tell me why that's a big deal, I couldn't find while looking. I just got very confused. But Kolkata has changed its name. This used to be a very royal place. Lots of visits from various, officials from all over the world. And then Jharkhand, which is this one over here. Again, it's a shame you can't really see the borders very clearly without specifically clicking. Jharkhand is a state in eastern India, and it's mostly... Okay, so every country... Again, I hate to stereotype a whole country. I think it's ridiculous to say, but most countries, when they get super big, tend to get a region where some uprisings tend to happen. And so Jharkhand is a place where lots of neo-Marxist groups will maybe do a little bit of an uprising. You know, maybe they take over a mine, or the the reason to try and defend the left-wing extremism in Jharkhand. So Jharkhand's an area which is mostly popular with Jharkhand, I should say. With natural resources. That is their big export. It's not popular. I mean, they're popular from people who buy them from them. But Jharkhand is very, very big with those things. However, when you have natural resources, it usually gets unevenly distributed. You know the whole theory about Marxism and, like, capital? Like, you can't just make your own diamond mine or your own iron ore mine. And so the problem is the resources are very unevenly distributed. And so what do you do about that? Blow up a mine, hold an insurrection against your country's government. I mean, whichever one works best. And so that's, it's sad to say it is the region where this happens in India, but it means that you're safe from it in the rest of India, you might say. Oh, also Bengal, I should have mentioned. Bengal is, it's a really huge language. I believe they don't like the idea of India adopting Hindi as a national language, because India speaks Hindi is a kind of bridge language, but also they speak English as a kind of bridge language. They have 22 languages. Look at all the languages they have. It's too many, I might say, as an outsider. But yeah, India is a very, very much a patchwork of places combined together. That's why all these places have self-governance. I mean, what happens in Telangana is going to be entirely different to what happens in Gujarat, which they have different beliefs to people in Punjab. It's crazy this whole place ever works as one place. But yeah, speaking of one place, Telangana is definitely one I want to mention, because both this and Karnataka are very, very widely known for tech. Migrant, not only inside the country, like India's tech industry comes from both these places, but also outside the country. So, for example, Bangalore is one of the huge cities for this in, Karnataka. This is the weird thing. It's called Bengaluru on Google Maps, and it's often called Bengaluru, but it's also called Bangalore on every flight schedule I've ever looked up. I really can't work that one out. And, if you can work it out, tell me about that. Why is it sometimes called Bangalore on Google Maps, but it's called Bangalore everywhere elsewhere? Also, it's a nice 26 degrees there today, but mostly cloudy, so definitely visit Bangalore. But if you look at these two states on a map, Hyderabad and Bangalore are two huge cities, so that maybe explains the tech stuff, like cities tend to bring that together. But also, the other interesting thing about these places is so many of these people will take their try to get a tech visa to the United States, that there's something called a US visa temple in Bangalore, and so this temple is in the Chikkor Balaji temple, and it's where you can pray, and if you pray, you'll get the visa to go to America, because unlike any reasonable country, which would like prioritize people based on their the credentials, as long as you meet the credentials for a H-1B visa in America, they just do a lottery every year to see who gets to come, which is a really great system. And so what do you do when you need to be in a lottery? You pray for the visa, even in the age of Trump. What a ridiculously American tagline there. Like, oh yeah, that's the biggest thing concerning us. In fact, here's what Indians say. They say that their God is greater than Trump, and you've got to admit, if their God is real, then their God probably is stronger than Trump, right? So I mean, wow, 2 Trump references in an India video. What a treat already this is. Anyway, so this is the kind of tech heart of the country. Maharashtra is the Bollywood heart. So Bollywood, tech, you kind of got like the fun thing going on there. But you might notice around Karnataka is Goa. Goa is one of the most fascinating parts of India. I'm so glad I learned about the states just to learn about Goa, because this is a place that I really want to go to, I would say. But no, the reason I want to go there so bad is I gotta stop making that joke, is because it's a former Portuguese part of the country. It belonged to Portugal back in the day, and so now it's one of the smallest states by population, but it is one of the more urban states, and it's also one of the more bizarre states. It is a very, very strange one. It's popular with beaches and stuff like that. If you've ever heard of people going to Goa, it makes sense that would be here. They're not going to a different Goa. But yeah, the Portuguese influence is very interesting, and the fact that, by the way, so Goa had to be annexed by India in the 60s. India fought a war with Portugal, and then they just took some territory. That's the crazy bit to me. It's like India has only existed for 70-something years, but in those 70-something years, loads of states have come out of nowhere. Like, do you think I was going to skip these seven states to the east here? These 7 states were slowly annexed into India one by one. Sikkim used to be a roughly independent, it was a British protectorate, then it was an Indian protectorate, then they just annexed it in the 1970s. In fact, these 7 states right here are often referred to as the 7 Sisters, because although, there's like a 200 million population or 100 million population in these sorts of states, when you look over at the east, it's like 1 million people live in each of those, and the most notable fact, besides the places where alcohol's banned, but you can just, you can buy alcohol anywhere anyway, which is fascinating. Besides Assam, which is famous for its tea, right? The Arunachal Pradesh is a part of India that is claimed by China and mostly administered by India, but there's a fun exception, like with everything, because wow, has China started building a village in the part of... So, the Upper Subaranshi district is the area which is controlled by China, and they used to just have a few military posts there. Now they're building a village. Is that okay? I guess that was during COVID. Wow. I can't believe they were building a village during COVID. But, yeah, this is the region of it. I actually, this is my first time seeing how big an area it is. It's not that big. Yeah, if the entire state of Arunachal... Honestly, it's very bizarre. We can't see the borders because the borders are like that. But whatever, you get the point. So there's a whole region of this state which just maybe belongs to China. Or maybe is just is being controlled by China. Which way around does it work? You tell me. So, with that said, I feel like we're doing pretty well here. We've only got a few more territories to go. We've got Kerala, we've got Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. Right? Is that all the ones left? I'm pretty sure that's all the ones left. So I feel like we should talk Tamil Nadu. I am obviously... Okay, here's a crazy fact you won't know. My grandmother is from Sri Lanka. She immigrated from what was then British Ceylon to go to the UK, but she's neither Tamil nor Sinhalese, the two major groups there. She's called a Burgher. That's a fun side story. But yeah, so the two major groups in Sri Lanka are Sinhalese and Tamils, and the Tamils are also huge in this one state of India. And so the Tamil language, obviously, I happen to know, is one of the oldest existing languages. Like it's called like a pre-classical language or something. It has roots from like 300 BC, but it's still spoken today. You can tell it's an old language because it looks like insanity. I can say that because I'm Sri Lankan, right? It looks like insanity, but yeah, this is a very interesting state, super religious in lots of ways, and lots of fun things that can come from India come from here. Also, there are Tamil people not just in India, not just in Sri Lanka. There's also a huge Tamil area off Malaysia, and there's a huge Tamil population in Singapore, so that's fun. And you know what else is fun? Kerala, okay. No, Kerala is a state on India's tropical Malabar coast. So it's a tropical state. And what's the fun thing about Kerala? Well, I looked into their government, their legislative assembly, and first of all, love the elephants, Kerala. Love what you're doing there. But they're actually controlled by their largest party is the Communist Party of India, Marxist. The Marxist Communist Party of India, they control the government and have done so for quite some time. In fact, the second largest party is the Communist Party of India that isn't Marxist. So it's the Marxist communists versus the not Marxist communists. That's the real political fight happening there, which is absolutely fascinating to me. So yeah, this entire region of India is communist, run at least on the state level, and yeah, interestingly enough, it is fairly effective in lots of ways. They are very I assume that means like, is this like a really poor area? Is this the mineral case? It's like, no, they are very tourist heavy, and so they're not really, they're the type of communists where they don't destroy everything because they know that would scare away the businesses, which is maybe the way that you should do it. Anyway, it's an absolutely fascinating situation. And then finally, we've got Andhra Pradesh, and it's the 7th largest state by area, and it's an absolutely bizarrely shaped state, right? I mean, if there's going to be a visa temple, shouldn't it be in Visa Kahapatnam over here. I'm just saying, it makes sense to me. But yeah, this is a huge state that's been even bigger in the past. Wow, should we consult our trusty map right here? Oh, it looks like it used to be part of Madras. See that? Like, it's crazy to me to see the changes between then and now. Like, Assam used to take up all this space. It got split into so many different places. Anyway, yeah, it's very, very bizarre trying to explain India from the past. Even India from right now, right? You're like, what is going on with all of this? And the answer is it's a very, very, very bizarre place. In fact, you know, it's just like I mentioned, like, well, there's 8 union territories, and off those union territories, again, we won't dive into all of them. I want to dive into the weirdest one, though, which is so Chandigarh is a shared capital between, it is a capital city of both Punjab and Uttarakhand. I think I might be getting the two of those wrong, but it's the state capital for 2 separate states because they split apart. Wait, let me show you. They split apart, man. It's even more confusing when you look at the previous map. Let's pretend we didn't do that. So it's the state capital for 2 states, but exists outside of either state and is instead a national capital territory. And so it's very much a planned city, right? I mean, if you look around this, you can see. I love these roundabouts. Have to say, there's a lot going on here. Interesting place. But oh yeah, look at this. Wanna come over here? Attention, you're under CCTV surveillance. Using English right there, right? Very fun place. But yeah, I am absolutely fascinated by the capital territory, by all of the union territories, and I'm fascinated by the fact that, like, yeah, so there's this like disputed region up here. Oh, also I missed out one of the most important facts. There's the state of Himachal Pradesh is they have a summer capital and a winter capital, right? It's absolutely bizarre. Also, apparently they're host to the Dalai Lama. There's so many bizarre things about India. There's so many interesting things about India. It's a country that I just spent hour after hour after hour diving into, and you just learn more and more and more, and you get more and more intrigued. And also, I forgot to mention that I want to say Andhra Pradesh has the lowest literacy rate in India, but they also designed the flag. And you got to admit, the Indian flag, you know, say what you like about India, the flag's pretty decent. I think it probably breaks the rule of being, you know, drawable by a child. It's just a little bit too complex for that. But as a whole, like a tricolour with a little India-specific stamp so you know it's no one else, it does the job. And honestly, that is what's going on with India. And I think India is a great example of, like, when there's a billion people living together, trying to group them into any one category, even trying to group them into one party, like the biggest party, who got, by the way, more votes than probably people exist in your country. The opposition got more votes than there are people in my country, by about double. But not only is, like, in a country that big, the world's largest democracy, it's not, even though he only got, like, 37% of the vote, that's all of his alliance, right? There's a whole bunch of parties that make that up. When you start looking into India electorally, it gets even more interesting. But yeah, we'll have to share that for the next time we dive into India's electorate. For now, this is India, one of the most bizarre and interesting places on the earth. And where should I go? If you're Indian, let me know. I'm a city person. I've been, you know, I want to go to India, but it's like, do you go to New Delhi? Do you go to Mumbai? Do you go to Bangalore? You know, that's an interesting place too. Do I go to Goa? I've heard things about that. Do I go to Pune? And Pune, so Maharashtra is like, so much of India's culture comes from here. Like, whether that's just my British, you know, like my British perspective or not. Like, Pune is where badminton was invented, apparently. Mumbai is like one of the most intense cities on the planet. Like, there's a suburb around here somewhere that has like one of the highest population densities. And so if you zoom in on the street, you don't just see like buildings on the street. You see buildings like this. Like, look at what's happening here. This is nuts. There's a school in there. There's a vegetable shop. There's multiple vegetable shops. And the fruit shop too. You can buy all of it. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely fascinating country. This has been a brief breakdown of India. If you want to see a breakdown of another country's states, let me know that also. Yeah, you don't let me know anything. Second channel. Don't care. Goodbye.